All right, what's up, gang? Back again. I got this little tripod thing that holds my phone, so maybe I'll get back to doing videos a lot. But I guess I'm getting ready for work, waiting to leave for work, and I just ate lunch, and I watched Michael Bisping again. And I usually don't listen to Bisping very often. Several reasons why I'm not a big fan of his, but I don't dislike him. But the video I watched that grabbed my attention, I just clicked one. I didn't really read the title. But as he got to talking, he grabbed my attention a lot. And he was talking about Arman and Islam are fighting, not this upcoming weekend, but I believe the next. I believe it's January 18th at UFC 312. I believe it's 312. And I guess Arman interviewed somewhere recently. I've actually seen a couple of his interviews. I watched him on Ariel last week or the week before. But he interviewed somewhere, and Bisping's saying that Arman said Arman is not fully invested in MMA. And that's what grabbed my attention. I was like, whoa, wait, what? And Bisping was sort of presenting it as is Arman showing doubt already that he can compete with Islam. Now, mind you, I hadn't made a video about this or spoke about this, but there's sort of in the back of my head thinking Arman didn't really want Islam. I think Arman was hoping that Poirier was going to beat Islam and he would take Poirier. I'm not quite sure where I got that. I think it might have to do a little bit of stuff Chael said. But when we go back through the history timeline, Arman called out Islam at least once, but I don't know how many times. But to give us some context on it, Arman's debut fight was, I believe, 6 years ago against Islam, and he lost a decision. Arman took the fight on short notice. I didn't know. I'm quoting Bisping on that, so I hope that's true. I watched the fight a month or two ago. I rewatched it, but I don't remember all the details. I feel like Islam just dominated the grappling. Not like a Khabib versus Conor domination, but you know how it goes. And Bisping was saying he feels like now obviously Arman's improved. He feels like Arman has the edge on striking. Sorry, I'm rambling a bunch of different things to give you guys context and information. So let's go back to the main point that grabbed my attention I want to talk about. And that's Arman saying he wasn't fully invested in MMA. That came from an interview, and whoever was interviewing him kind of questioned that some more, or I guess their conversation led to him saying that at the last sentence, and I'm about to make that all make sense. Arman tells the interviewer a story about Arman sitting in like a Phantom, a really, really expensive car. And then Dana and Hunter pull up and they're in a less expensive car, but still an expensive car. And they're like, what are you doing in that? And Arman explains Arman came from and is a part of a wealthy family already. It's not like he had to do MMA, unlike 99% of MMA fighters. It's like his family owns hotels and restaurants and whatever else. That then so I'm filling in gaps. I feel like as explaining running businesses and stuff, it's like MMA isn't your number one commitment. MMA is only making you this much money, and this over here has been making you this much money for 5 times as long. So I get where that perspective would come from. But I don't feel like it meant Arman was taking time off or anything. There could be a subconscious doubt or a way to give yourself an excuse, like John Jones would talk about how he would party the week before a fight. That way in his head he could live with himself if he lost. He could be like, well, you didn't really give it 100%. I don't think that's the case with Arman. I think Arman's kind of very literal and very in the moment of his conversations. When I watched him with Ariel, I was like, man, something's just I want to say a tad bit off, but I feel like saying off has a negative connotation. There's something just slightly different about him. Just the way where his eyes are looking when he speaks, the way he delivers his sentences. Obviously, we have language barriers, so he's learned another language, and that can be a challenge. But there's just something slightly different to Arman's persona. Not like a gimmick persona, just who he is. There's slightly, I almost want to say not all there. It's like you can tell everything's going to register, but it's like I feel like there's not a lot of thought going behind on the scenes. And that could be because he's constantly required to be active in the moment with his thoughts. Like if you have 5 different businesses and you're a fighter, it's not like you get a lot of time to sit back and reflect and to process what's going on around you. But where I really took interest with that, where I'm going to shift this and make this how it's my video, I think there would be benefit to someone doing that. I think a lot of fighters take this shit too seriously. And when we take shit too seriously, we make it more dramatic, more anxiety ridden, more adrenaline. There's more pressure that we're putting on ourselves when we do all that. As compared to if we're nonchalant and whatever, that lack of pressure, that lack of adrenaline, that lack of anxiety leads to better performance. If you're tense in practice and you're tense in a fight, you're not going to perform as well as when you're relaxed. If Arman is doing all of the right training things, and I can only assume he is, he's going to make weight, have the right people in his camp, putting in the work, I really do think that would be an added benefit to not be dwelling and pressing all your thoughts about your opponent and everything. Just an acceptance of you're going to get in there and fight, and you know how to win a fight. It's just a matter of doing it and finding it in the moment when it's live. I think that'd be a very, very interesting approach. Now, the way Bisping was presenting it, he's like, Bisping didn't say that he's not focused on this fight. He's just kind of talking, having a conversation, which I liked. And I think those were Bisping's exact words. But he's saying when someone's not fully invested, that's when people get hurt. When he said that, that's when I'm like, man, I don't know. Me not being, so like coming up and fighting, when I got into it, I didn't want to be a UFC champion or anything like that. I just wanted to have a hobby. I was depressed and I needed something to do. But everyone I ran into, they're going to be in the UFC. People walk into the gym for the first practice. I want to make it into the UFC. So they they would go way harder than they needed to. They would hurt themselves, and they would create an adrenaline and a pressure and an anxiety that would go unspoken. So then it would get really awkward. Say I'm a year into training, and I'm a year into training, and I just do it for fun. I goof off. So I make 3 practices a week. This other guy's year into training, wants to be in the UFC, anxiety ridden, whatever. I don't know the reasons, but he's only making 1 practice a week. Well, then at the end of that year, who do you think's performing better? Then it gets a little awkward when the guy whose goal was to be in the UFC is getting outperformed by someone who's just doing it goofing off. Then it makes conversations hard because a guy who's doing it incorrectly or not as much is trying to be directive to people who are just goofing off when they can perform it better. Does that make sense? So in essence, I think it's a good idea. I actually think that's actually a really good approach. If someone, and I've thought that about myself. I was like, man, one of the smartest things I could ever do if I go to compete would be to bust my phone out and play a high-level chess game. That anxiety of waiting in the back for hour to 3. Man, occupy that time so you're not thinking about your opponent. I'm not saying you don't want to plan and be prepared and everything, but there's lines where you need to control how long you're thinking about something because it will just consume you. It will completely consume you. I'm not going to get too in depth into Arman and Islam in a prediction this right now because it's not the next fight up. It's not the next card up. But one thing Bisping said is he said Arman, he thinks would have the edge in striking. He's quicker or whatever striking. I don't believe that anymore. Islam is becoming one of the best strikers at 55. He was piecing up Dustin. It's only going to be better from there. I got a feeling Umar is a big part of Islam's striking getting better. His striking has gotten way better since those Volk fights. Halfway after Volk won, his striking started improving, and I don't know. I think he's going to have the reach advantage and know how to use it on Arman. Something else that was interesting about this fight, Bisping mentioned that I did not know. I dog heavyweights all the time because the heavyweight division is like just a joke. It's getting better now, but it was always the least talented fighters. It's just big fat dudes that can have a bunch of weight behind their punch, so they swing till they knock each other out. But most of the time, they both get gassed with their hands on their knees before the fucking end of the first round. Now it's getting better, don't get me wrong, but in an essence, to try to share that opinion with people as I'm trying to justify why I feel the way I am, and I'm in conversation, someone's like, why don't you like heavyweights? It's like the heavyweight title, Stipe had the record with 2 defenses. Is that not crazy? And it was like the record was 4 total. He had 2 consecutive and then 4 total, something like that. And it was like record, GOAT. And it's like, dude, these numbers are small. The record defenses, I need to look this up. But apparently Islam's defended 3 times, Volk twice, and then Dustin. That does not seem like it's building a legacy yet by any means. You've only one person in your fucking weight class. But then Khabib only defended, Bisping rattles this off. Khabib only defended 3 times. BJ Penn only defended 3 times, and someone else. I don't know who, if he did say another one. But I guess he's tied for the record. That's crazy. Look out, still, I'm reminded all the time how much we are in infancy in this sport. 3 fights, 3 title defenses is the record. At 155, that's like one of the premier weight classes. And it has been the most talented weight class at multiple points in UFC's history. And it only has 3 defenses. That's crazy. Israel might have defended 3 times in 1 year at 85. That's wild. That blew my mind. I did not know that. But yeah, that's where we're at today. This is just a little recap. And I think it might be beneficial to Arman not being fully invested into his fight going into Islam.